All right, and welcome to another episode of B&B Financially Free. Today, I am so excited to have John Andrew in the house, virtually that is. And John Andrew is going to talk to us all about this amazing company that he started called Wander. John, why don't you start with telling us what Wander is?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I'm super stoked. So effectively what Wander is I think we've all had that vacation rental experience where you go and you rent a place and it doesn't look like the photos, or the beds are uncomfortable, or the internet is bad. And so the whole idea with Wander is to standardize the operations and the distributions and bring a hotel-like brand to the vacation rental space. In a fancy way, you can think about it like a verticalized platform. In a simple way, you can think about it like a distributed hotel. So that's really what Wander is.
For anybody who hasn't checked out what Wander is, when you go on their platform, you're going to see extraordinary homes throughout the country. And I think you guys at some point might be throughout the entire world. But when I describe the homes on your platform, to me, they're super luxurious. They're super unique. They have great amenities. They're really nice and secluded. And I really want to get into, both the type of assets that qualify to be a Wander property, but I also can't wait to just hear about how you started this company. For those that aren't familiar with you, you were Forbes 30 under 30. You have an extensive background in tech startup. Why don't you talk to us about what gave you the idea to start Wander and how long you guys have been around?
Absolutely. And you do an incredible job describing the homes and the properties. I may need to drag you into future conversations just for that. No, I really appreciate it. It means the world. My background, I think, is a little bit unique. It's definitely not traditional hospitality. Though I think when you understand who I am as an individual, it makes much more sense. I've been working in technology for a really long time. Started my first internet company when I was 13, 14, this little game server company, which was obviously a massive distraction from school, having multiple employees and taxes and all the chaos related to it. It was a lot of fun.
You had taxes at 13?
Yes.
Oh,
I remember
my gosh.
I remember my pop, he raised me and my sister, single dad, incredible man. I remember he came in, he's like, okay, so like, how's the business that you're working on going, right? Super supportive. And I'm like, it's going well. We made whatever, like $100,000, so far. And he's like, okay, cool. Like, we have to pay taxes. Like let me introduce you to like my accounting firm. And that's also where I learned that professional services are very expensive. I think we spent all of our like free cash flow on accountants for like that year's financials. So not great, but I think a lot of entrepreneurs learn how expensive accountants and lawyers are. So it's good to learn that at a young age. From there, my childhood continued to be a little bit atypical. I ended up enrolling in high school online. My pop would travel a lot for work and I wanted to spend the time with him. So got to travel all across the country and internationally. And that's really where I fell in love with hospitality, staying at these incredible, hotels and places and just meeting all types of amazing people. I mean, to say it simply, I fell in love with this planet that we're on. I think it's just so magical in so many ways. And then during that time, one of the companies I had started ended up doing pretty well. It was a developer tool company. So we would move the development environment where a software engineer writes code to an organization's cloud infrastructure. You can kind of think about it like Google Docs, but for software engineers.
Okay.
And so that company ended up doing well. We raised about $45 million from GGV, Founders Fund, Redpoint, all the big VCs, and a bunch of big enterprise customers as well. And I ran that company as CEO from ages 18 through 23. So I was supposed to be partying and in college, and instead was learning about enterprise software.
Wow.
It was a great experience. Candidly, I think the thing that I'm most grateful for with it all was the fact that like during those pretty formative years, the people I was surrounded with were just like incredible role models, both in business and also in life. And I realized that's like really, really rare. And certainly something that I think like all parents should try for their kids is to surround them with as many incredible adults as they can at a young age. It certainly had an impact on me. But yeah, I ran that company, and then somewhere between the classic like Silicon Valley stuff, TL Fellow, 30 under 30, all those shenanigans. and yeah, so I ran that company, ended up stepping down. Company had done really well and just felt like it was time, and started Wander 3 months later.
So how old were you when you started Wander?
I was 23 at the time.
So you're 25 now?
I'm 25 now.
That's awesome. So back to, when you should have been in college, I assume that you didn't go to college to start this company.
That's correct. Yeah. Coder was more than a full-time job, as you can imagine. So yeah, didn't go to school.
Well, that's like it's such a cool story, and just such a reminder that, not everybody has the same path, and you were even still able, you mentioned finding like a community. I think that that's something that's scary for people who maybe decide not to go to college to pursue their dreams, is that community aspect. How did you get plugged in with that community?
Yeah. I mean, speaking candidly, building a company is a super lonely pursuit. Mm-hmm. You at the end of the day are the one making your decisions. The people who you have inside of the company, they're all your employees. And so by definition, your friendship and relationships are very different. And then also too, at least for me as an early entrepreneur, there was quite the age gap. Mm-hmm. And so, I couldn't relate to things like having a mortgage or otherwise. Though ironically,
you did have to do taxes.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it is lonely. And I think that's something that most business owners, have. And of course, like many people, they say like, the most important people in their lives are their family, which is certainly super important. I don't think that I would have been able to function without like a really incredible like father and sister. In terms of the community, I didn't have any connections to VC or Silicon Valley or any of those things. Like I was just a kid with an internet connection. And at the end of the day, what got me like quote unquote noticed was really just like what we built. When people saw Coder's technology and the platform and the usage, that's really what put us on the map. I mean, I didn't even have a LinkedIn at the time. Like it was like I was like very rough around the edges as a young CEO. And so, over time, as you build things and, you operate yourself in a certain way and have certain ethics and handle relationships, with grace, who you are in this world, like people tend to gravitate towards it. You build your reputation, and, before you know it, you get to be in the room with some truly remarkable people. But I still don't feel like I'm necessarily like plugged into the whole like scene. I just do what I do. I love my company. I love the product. Candidly, like I love people, and yeah, it's cool that it's cool that I've been able to work with so many incredible folks so far. So
that's amazing. And I feel like that too. Someone said this, you don't take care of things that you don't love. And they were talking about this from like a health standpoint, but this has kind of directed me into the type of real estate that I like to invest in. Just because intrinsically it's so much easier to take care of like an asset or a company that like you really love. And I think that, Wander is just this example of you intrinsically had like an interest in our world and traveling, and the types of properties that you gravitate towards and you select are just so special. And so I would love to hear more about, when you created Wander, like at what point in your life, like were you like, I want to go all in on this, and what problem were you trying to solve with Wander?
Absolutely. So when I had stepped down from Coder, um, the first thing I wanted to do was go and get away, rent a cabin out in Colorado, enjoy the fresh air. I think that's something you're very familiar with, that idea. And, yeah, I think that happens for a lot of people, right? That there are like moments in their lives where they need to get away or they want to go on vacation or whatever else. And I think that's such a beautiful idea, right? Like you're basically like in the pursuit of happiness effectively. Like that's why you go on a trip. Like you're looking to find your happy place, like where you can have memories with your friends and family or even just be alone by yourself or whatever it is. I don't think anyone travels to have a bad time.
Right.
It's not why we do it. And so, when I had gone on that trip, like I'm a pretty like low key person. Like I could sleep on the ground, like not a big deal. However,
it's so
like
funny seeing the properties that you have
and knowing that it's a kid who has no problem with
sleep
like
on the ground,
his nails, and I'm certainly not a I'm certainly not a. It's funny that you say that. Actually, it's really interesting.
Yeah, because like your properties are so bougie, and you're saying like, oh, like I don't need a lot, so maybe we'll unpack that another time.
I think candidly, it's because I love to give. Like I give my everything to like the company, to the team, to our customers, and so like I don't need a lot for myself. Candidly, like everything I have is more than enough. But I do love to like spoil everyone around me, including obviously like the customer. So I think that's what they get. They get like my imagination running wild. But in any event, I think that was really it. Like the experience I had in Colorado, wasn't that. And I thought there was the opportunity to create it, to unlock these magical places and, operate them under a brand standard and, distribute them to these customers who, and I think that's probably a big piece of it, is that, Wander has collected, I think we're about to pass, over 200,000 users, these individuals who love to travel to these types of places, to the, beautiful modern home looking over the ocean, or like a property like yours, right? Where it's like above this river. I mean, how cool. Like those types of places that inspire and excite. And so, it's really like, two sides of the same coin. One is incredible operations and amenities and upkeep. And then the other is, access to these incredible locations for customers that are in that pursuit of happiness.
Yeah. And I love that Wander, it's find your happy place, right? Is your company slogan. That's really cool. So let's talk about like what goes into creating a property that can operate as a Wander, because, something else about you guys is, you're extremely selective, and, it's almost like you guys are really bridging this gap, because I think that there is this frustration from the consumer where, sure, an Airbnb and Vrbo sounds great, but you just are taking a gamble at some level every single time. Like you're not sure if you're going to be staying with a great operator. You're not sure what to expect from like a quality standpoint. You don't know if there's going to be someone always available to help you, kind of like what you would have in a nice resort. So talk to us about what are the qualifications for your properties to become part of the Wander portfolio?
Absolutely. So there's like a technical answer to this, and then there's like a more fun answer. The technical answer, because I think your audience would be interested, is that Wander's an extremely data focused company. So we'll go through and effectively collect and analyze every region across the United States and internationally that is profitable and high income potential. And then within those regions, we'll go through and identify every existing short-term rental, along with on-market and off-market opportunities that meet a certain quality threshold in terms of the home when it was constructed, views, amenities, those different dynamics. That shortens it down to a pretty small, hit list of properties that are, have a high enough revenue potential where Wander can afford to give it the level of care that we do. And also, of course, quality. from a quality perspective, a lot of the attributes candidly are, less defined. You're really looking for inspirational locations, places that really wow the person, whether it's on the ocean or the beach or ski in, ski out, or again, like your bridge house is super cool, like above the river. Like how cool is it to stay in a house above a river? Like that's amazing. Like those types of destinations that are true experience for the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And, for us, we have to operate with a certain level of, fit and finish as well. Our guests are super demanding in terms of, the cleanliness and, all those different pieces. And so we really, push hard there and pride ourselves. But that's really all that's necessary. From there we can do a lot. So we can go in, we can redo bathrooms or install furniture, install our technology, amenities, all those different things. So, all someone really needs is the bare bones. Obviously, the more that they have in place, the easier it is. But all we need for us is the bare bones, and we have a team who can do the rest. And then, from there, it really feels like a hotel. In the same way that when you go to the Four Seasons, you have your amenity kit and your slippers and little chocolates. Like that's the exact same experience you get at a Wander, and you have consistent beds and sleeping across the whole portfolio. And it's a really comforting feeling to go into a place and have it smell clean and the sheets are crisp and there's no photos of grandma above the above the bed and everything else. The house is for you, and with the Wander stamp of approval, you sort of know that there's like no serial killer like hiding in the closet. Like this home has been vetted.
That is the key, is like you just don't know walking into any short-term rental like what you could find in the closets. And I love that this is bringing consistency to the space. From a company standpoint, you guys started by buying and acquiring all of your properties, and it seems now like you're kind of transitioning from that. Tell me about how you started from like an acquisition standpoint and where you're moving into.
Totally. So with marketplaces, there's a problem called the cold start problem. It's really this idea that you need customers who then, want to purchase inventory. Mm-hmm. However, inventory only wants to sign up with a platform that has customers. And so you end up with this cold start problem, sort of like a chicken and the egg. My big thesis was with Wander, candidly, really started with the customer dynamic, which was if we could provide incredible destinations operated to this consistent standard and then build the technology and distribution platform, you can think about it like Wander has its own version of Airbnb, that like people would love that product and that it would have idea market fit and hopefully product market fit. And then of course people would enjoy it. And then the next step is making sure the unit economics are positive and all those certain pieces. The fastest way for us to get there was scaling on balance sheet. So buying our first few locations, setting them up, creating that brand standard, and then launching those to our user base. We saw really incredible product market fit right off the bat. I think before we launched, we had 50,000 users on the wait lists. Those first few locations booked out entirely. And what we continue to see and continue to see to this day is like pretty remarkable outperformance relative to the market. The easiest way to think about it is like a Wander premium, and it's typically a boost of anywhere between 20 and 30% on occupancy, and pretty meaningful increase in ADR relative to the market. And so as we continue to scale on balance sheet, we reached the point in the portfolio where people had homes that were outside of our buy box, and it didn't necessarily make sense to continue to scale on balance sheet. There are also, of course, headwinds that are attached to continuing to do so. You have interest rate headwinds and other different pieces. And so, we began in early 2023 to take on third-party properties who wanted effectively for us to operate them in that standard. And the level of product market fit that we found with the owners of these assets was pretty remarkable. I think even they were more excited once they saw the results actually kick in, because it's very different than than what you get, operating outside of the platform. Not to say that you can't operate your own product to Wander's standards and to its potential, but it's a lot of work and very atypical.
Yeah, and I think something that you guys have that's so special is just your dedicated user base too. I mean, you guys you're not, when we first met, I was like, oh, this is like a property management company. And what I'm realizing now is that it's not. This is a third platform, just like there's Airbnb and Vrbo. Now there's Wander with its own dedicated base. And I could see that just continuing to grow because it really is filling a need in the space for consistency and high quality.
For context, we drive about 80% of our bookings directly through Wander.
Wow.
And we have certain properties on the portfolio who solely, list with Wander. So we don't cross distribute. And those performance metrics are the same. So we've spent a lot of time and invested a lot of resources into building an experience, for the user that feels the same as Airbnb, where you could download the Wander app, browse properties, check out, you have your profile, you have concierge, you have all these things. And it's a significant capital investment.
Oh yeah.
And also, of course, too, like it's where I'm like the best as a founder is like the software and the product and the design and like that experience as well. And so, that's really like what makes Wander a little bit different. I think that if I was a traditional hospitality entrepreneur, that side of the equation would probably be a little bit different than what we have today. So feel very fortunate that I that I have that background. And I would say that's really what results in Wander's outperformance. It's really not just the quality of operations, but it's the dedicated technology platform and the marketing that stands behind it.
Yeah, it's so cool that you were able to integrate tech with your love for hospitality. Let's talk about, some of your first couple of acquisitions. Like, how did you choose what properties you were purchasing? What price point do most Wander properties like fall within? And were investors feeling like they were getting a return on the real estate as well as maybe their investment into the tech portion of your company?
Yeah. So we scaled all on balance sheet, really, just like we raised venture capital for our first few rounds and scaled our number of locations with that and credit facility. Obviously, we started to add, third-party dedicated real estate investors at a certain point. In terms of our first few acquisitions, really it was all data-based. I mean, the cool thing as a why now for this category, and this goes for any investor, is that you have tools like AirDNA, key data, the list goes on and on. I will warn that, you really have to do your own diligence beyond that data because there can be a lot of noise. So you kind of have to find the signal there. But that's really how it started, was like just basic underwriting of these assets. Now, with short-term rentals, you can get it pretty much down to a science, but not entirely. So you really still need to be mindful. I think for us, like Wander was the combination of proving positive unit economics, proving that these properties could yield and cash flow very well, but also laying the foundation for, this network of homes that we thought could be really meaningful. And so you kind of have this mix of the two. Like if you're purchasing from just a yield perspective, it may make sense to buy something that's a little bit, further behind and bring it up to standard so you can get into a little bit of a higher yield. Versus for us, we wanted to buy incredible assets and then just ensure that they were operating profitably was really, really our big goal. And I'm proud to say that like across the portfolio, like all of our assets are profitable, which is super cool. And meaningfully profitable, but it's certainly a lot of work. You have to be very specific. And even within that, there's a range for your buy box. For us, it would be anywhere between $1.5 million and $3.5 million. And obviously the higher up that range you go from a yield perspective, it gets more and more difficult. So I would say to anyone who's listening, who's trying to craft a strategy, if you're looking for cash flow and yield, buy things that take a little bit of work, bring them up to standard, focus on a lower cost basis. If you're focused on, an inspirational portfolio or, something that you want to hold on to for the next, few decades, then you can go, a little bit up market, buy something that's, in a great location. Because at the end of the day, that's really what you're buying is the underlying ground and the location that it's in.
Yeah. And I see that a lot. Like we'll have investors that are strictly cash flow investors. And those might be the people that would fall into that buy box of, between 1.5 to 3 million or, even less in some areas around Colorado. And then you have other investors who are thinking about long-term growth. So they're positioning to have a property in a location that is just going to continue to cater towards a really high level buyer. And so those are more equity buyers. And it seems like you guys actually have a mix of both in your portfolio today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say the majority of our owners really are just long-term holders. This is an asset that they feel very passionate about. It's in their portfolio, and then they're enjoying the cash flows from it. I wouldn't say that our portfolio of owners is particularly yield focused. We certainly have a few that are, where their cost basis is low enough to deliver really substantial results. The one thing that I would warn people about short-term rentals is really being mindful about what you're purchasing it for, what your goals are, and of course also like not overextending yourself in that pursuit, because obviously when you have one asset, you don't have a lot of diversification versus if you have exposure to dozens of assets, for example. And so it can be really tricky, but also, of course, an incredibly lucrative strategy. I think that's one of the most interesting things about real estate is it's all about like the work that you put in to finding incredible assets, operating them at an incredible level, the diligence, the thoughtfulness. You really have to be mindful. And especially from a yield perspective, I'd really focus on your cost basis. And then I'd also remember that at the end of the day, this is a hospitality asset category. It's effectively somewhere in between, in between single family homes and hotels. And so you kind of have to remember that. Buying an uninspiring home and just focusing on what it could do as a short-term rental, there's a lot of risk there.
Especially today, and I'm sure you've seen this because you guys started in 2021 and then 2022, at least in the beginning, was like another banner year. Whereas now, I don't know if I would love to hear if you're seeing a difference in revenue this year versus years prior, but especially today, the customer is now expecting more from their short-term rental experience than what they were a few years ago. Like Airbnb, Vrbo, Wander is now getting more mature. And so the customer base has standards that they're trying to meet. And so, we talk a lot about how that mediocre middle is the asset class that's hurting the most. Like they don't fall into the super affordable range, and they're not gearing towards a client who maybe isn't as affected in today's economy. Have you seen a difference in revenue from when you started versus today? Are you seeing a stable line? Are you seeing growth? Are you seeing a decrease?
Yeah, so we're up about 5% year over year on top of 2022, same store growth. So we've been very fortunate. But that's a result of a lot of optimizations that have happened on the platform, from conversion to remarketing, targeting, all these different things, like the speed of the platform, like all those pieces that, as an independent operator, fall outside of your strategy. And so, what I would say is that, and I think a lot of operators have already focused on this, but a really easy way to think about it is what are your distribution channels? If you have just Airbnb and VRBO, you're effectively reliant on them driving traffic to your listing, and then obviously them converting and checking out. What happened as the macro shifted is a lot of these larger organizations pulled back on their marketing spend. And that resulted in this pretty massive correction for a lot of short-term rental hosts who were saying like, where did all of this demand go? It's not necessarily the consumer softening as much as it is just a massive, shift in terms of ad spend and growth. And of course, too, as the pandemic starts to, wind down from a regulation perspective, you have people going back to school, going back to work, those different pieces, though still remote work is now at like an all-time high, and it'll stay at an all-time high for quite a while. So I would say that one thing that I would highly encourage is focusing on the marketing aspect. Places like your Instagram, is there opportunities for SEO, direct booking sites? One of the cool things is that now a lot of platforms are starting to develop, systems and direct booking and otherwise that are relatively easy to set up. To be clear, it is a lot of work, and it's much easier when you can list on Airbnb and fill your property. But that's certainly starting to change to a certain extent. So all you can do is really focus on the basics: quality of photos, quality operations. Start to add third-party marketing channels. Really focus on your pricing. Is your pricing above market clearing price? Is it too high? These are all the things that Wander does as well. And so certainly where I would recommend focusing if you're seeing softening. And then the other thing that I would do is also, of course, from a personal perspective, make sure that you're really managing your leverage, your expenses, as your top line begins to shift, making those adjustments. If you can cut your expenses by 20% and then increase your top line by 5% or 10%, it's pretty meaningful. So those are the places that I would recommend for an independent operator. And then I'd also know too that I very much know how difficult it is. And you are effectively a business owner. I mean, you are a business owner. So I just want to take a second to appreciate that and the economic impacts that everyone has, which I think actually most people don't realize the economic impact of effectively all these hotels that exist all across the United States and globally. It's really, really incredible for the local communities. So
it really is. And, there's so much talk in our space where sometimes short-term rental owners and hosts are, a little bit demonized for, this problem or that problem. But I think like how you've described, so many operators feel that they are offering this amazing experience to people. They're putting their hearts into it. They're putting their souls into it. They care so much about whether or not the guest is going to enjoy their experience. I would say 9 out of 10 operators fit that demographic of person because, they wouldn't be a short-term rental operator otherwise. It is hard. It does require the hospitality and the interpersonal relationship with the guest. And so I think that you guys have just done a really good job of doing that consistently while scaling. How many properties do you guys have now?
Yeah, so we'll be at about 50 by the end of the year. So we're starting to ramp up pretty quickly. I think our forecasts for 2024 will be nearing 200 locations. And that's also when we plan on expanding internationally. But of course, there will be limiters to that, wanting to make sure that our quality is still up there, that we're still delivering that outperformance. All those different pieces are really important to me to make sure that we're building a consistently strong foundation. So, we are entering that phase of a startup's, journey where the unit economics are positive. There's great product market fit. Now's the time to start to scale thoughtfully. But I think thoughtfully is the key word there. Because, it seems like we could build a pretty special company. But, I want to measure twice and cut once. So
yeah, for sure. Do you have a favorite property out of the portfolio?
I do. It's interesting now. I used to be able to say it with confidence when we owned all the homes because I was just picking of the homes we owned. I didn't have to worry about offending anyone. I will say obviously that all of our homes are incredible. It's the whole point of the platform. But I would say it's a tie right now between Bandon Beach in Bandon, Oregon on the coast. It's an incredible property. And a new one that we just added in Yellowstone in Paradise Valley. I was there 2 weeks ago, and it was just such an incredible like moment to just be looking at the mountains. And just Montana has a special way about it. So
I'm definitely going to have to check that out. And then tell me who your users are. Like, what do you know about the people that are booking these days?
Yeah, we know quite a bit, though obviously like user and data privacy is super important to us. So it's all like locked down on the platform. But yeah, we know quite a bit. We know what areas they want to focus on. We know generally what age brackets and income brackets they fall into. I think that's probably one of the interesting things about Wander is, our users are all like wealthy individuals who really can afford to travel and explore and experience, which is atypical compared to what you get on a lot of other platforms. The one thing they all have in common is an abnormally high amount of travel days per year. So our users will travel 3 to 6 weeks per year, which is pretty substantial. And that's the average. And so a lot of those users have now dedicated that time to just spend traveling on Wander, and will take, a dozen plus trips a year across the portfolio, which is a really, really cool dynamic. And I think that's also where our consistency kicks in, because they can go and stay at Malibu and know that it's going to be the same experience as Florida or New York or Colorado or wherever else. So that repeat customer dynamic across the portfolio is certainly a really valuable network effect for Wander as a company.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people try to imagine like, who is my customer going to be? Who is my demographic going to be? And I think, sometimes that takes, maybe launching your first property and then replicating that. Like we'll have people that will gear towards families and they know all of the amenities that their families are looking for, or they'll gear towards bachelorette parties and they know exactly what that type of demographic is for. And so I love that you guys know exactly who is staying in your property so you can continue to wow and delight that customer.
Yeah, I would say what's interesting with you describing it like that is that Wander has effectively chosen who our audience is by crafting the portfolio in the first place. And so, we really did focus on these, incredible homes and incredible destinations, modern, beautiful. And as a result, that's what our customers like, which is an interesting way of thinking about it. Wander could have started as a company that focused on, family friendly options or bachelor parties or anything else. And so, it's a really interesting thought.
Yeah, you could have gone any way. There's another side to your properties where I would describe them as like very contemporary because they are so integrated with like every property that you have is like right up on the ocean or right up on a mountain or big sweeping views. And so there's definitely just such a consistency in the style. Like they're all very secluded too. And so, it's neat that you guys kind of carved out what your customer base would be based off of that product.
Yeah. I think it's just something that that I would like, candidly. It's like, I want to stay on that house on a cliff. Like I want to stay on that house on the beach. But yeah, it's a really wonderful observation around the product you create. Yes, your customers choose your product, but you also choose your customers. And certainly interesting from a hospitality perspective, and probably also something I think that can be employed in a strategy for independent operators is understand what's around you and then focus on specific niches that could be hyper profitable. I think the bachelorette party concept and orienting there is really thoughtful, or for families or remote work. Amenitizing to that customer set could be really meaningful.
Yeah, I'll have people all the time that are just like, Chantal, I don't really care about the property. Like, just find me something that makes money. And I have, in the beginning of my career, I was like, fine, like, here's something that you can buy and you're going to make money. And here's all the data that supports it. But I found, especially when they were operating it themselves and not outsourcing it, if they didn't get it, then they were not doing a good job marketing it. So when they would speak to a designer, or if they decided to furnish it themselves, they were like, I don't really get why anybody would stay here. It's not a property that I would stay in, but, I see that there are other properties around it that are making money. Those people ended up being so much less happy than the people that understood why someone would want to stay there and bought something that made sense to them. And I think that you've created just like a business out of that, and such a great product out of that desire to, provide something that you would want to stay in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a firm believer in the idea that the vacation rentals are a hospitality asset category, and you may be able to generate a slight premium through, just through short-term rental versus long-term rental. But I think that, eventually in a perfectly efficient market, it should compress down. And so what you're left with, if you want to have any type of, extraordinary outperformance, is you really have to focus on the types of places that people want to stay. And I think that that's something that, of course, hotel companies and resort companies realize, right? You make a choice as a hotel operator. Do I want to have, the Marriott that's next to the airport because it's, great for, that utilitarian use case of short-term travel? Or do I want to have, the Four Seasons in Bora Bora with the houses above the water, and target that? And so it's really just a strategic choice. But for me, I view it as a hospitality asset category, and I want to fall into that ladder where, people open the door and they're like, "This is incredible." Partially just because I think it's more fun. So yeah,
love it. Well, to close this out, I know that you guys are actively looking for really unique properties. Are you looking at all markets? Like, are you taking on new people to be in the Wander community? I know you guys are super picky, but if someone thinks that they have an amazing property, is that something that you'd like to see?
Yeah, absolutely. We operate all across the United States. That's sort of our big focus, is geographic diversity. And that's really for creating the network effects from a portfolio perspective. We're always open to incredible and new homes. So if anyone listening, obviously thinks that they have one of those, we're more than happy to take a look. And if we have the bandwidth, we're happy to onboard it. But yeah, for us, we're extremely thoughtful and want to do it right. I think a lot of people candidly screw up this type of business, and I want to avoid those pitfalls as much as I can. So,
And how can people find more about Wander? How can they book their first stay? And I'll make sure to put all of this in the show notes too.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like a plug at the end. It's like, buy my book.
Do you have a book?
I don't. No. Maybe one day I'll write one. It'll be how the story goes. Yeah, we're wander.com with an A. So wander.com. And then we're at Wander on every social platform. So Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, if you use TikTok. So yeah, that's us. Feel free to check it out, explore. If you have any thoughts or questions, you can email support or talk to concierge. And yeah, really, really appreciate you having me again. This has been super special, and you are remarkably lovely. And I'm really grateful for the time. So,
John Andrew, thank you so much for coming on. I think that today was just so valuable, and I'm lucky to have met you when you were here in town. And I can't wait to see all that Wander does and becomes. And I'm just a raving fan already, and I can't wait to stay there.
It means the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.